The pizza was wrong before she even left the shop. Sophie Brennan knew it, had watched the new cook mix up the tickets, had tried to correct him before the order went out. But Marcus had screamed at her to mind her own business, his breath stinking of whiskey even at 7 in the evening. So she'd taken the wrong pizza to the wrong address and prayed whoever answered wouldn't care enough to complain. The address was in a part of the city she'd never delivered to before, gates that required codes, security cameras that tracked her beaten-up Honda like it was a threat, buildings that rose from manicured grounds like monuments to money she'd never have. The house at the end of the private drive wasn't a house at all. It was a fortress of stone and glass, glowing with warm light that spilled from windows taller than her apartment ceiling. She counted 6 cars in the circular drive, all black, all expensive, all worth more than she'd make in a decade. Wrong address. Had to be. But the GPS insisted, and Marcus would dock her pay if she came back without a signature. So Sophie gathered her courage, grabbed the pizza, and walked toward the front door. It opened before she could knock. The man who filled the doorway was built like a wall. Broad shoulders, thick neck, the particular stillness of someone who expected violence and was prepared to deliver it. His eyes swept over her uniform, the pizza box, her face, and narrowed. "You're not our usual driver." Tony called in sick. I'm covering his route. She held up the box like a shield. Large pepperoni, extra cheese? We ordered margarita. 3 of them. Of course they had. Sophie closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. 3rd wrong order this week. 3rd complaint that would come out of her paycheck. 3rd nail in the coffin of a job she couldn't afford to lose. I'm so sorry. I can go back. Get the right order. Who ordered this? A new voice coming from somewhere behind the wall of muscle. Deeper. Quieter. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. The man stepped aside, and Sophie saw him. Later, she would try to describe what made Dante Marchetti different from every other man she'd ever met. The dark hair silvered at the temples, the face that belonged on old coins, aristocratic, severe, beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with softness. The eyes, gray as storm clouds, that seemed to see straight through her. But in that moment, all she registered was power. He radiated it like heat, like gravity, like something that bent the world around him simply by existing. The shop made an error. I tried to correct it, but she was babbling. Couldn't stop. I can go back. It'll be 30 minutes, maybe 40 with traffic, but I'll make sure you get the right. What happened to your face? The question cut through her panic like a knife. Sophie's hand flew to her cheek, the one she'd covered with 3 layers of concealer, the one that still throbbed from last night when Marcus had. Nothing. The word came out too fast. I walked into a door. Clumsy, you know. Always have been. That's not a door. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could smell him. Cedar and something darker. Smoke or leather or danger. That's a fist. Someone hit you. Sophie's throat closed. The lie she'd prepared, the same lie she'd told her landlord, her co-workers, herself, dissolved on her tongue. It's nothing. Her voice cracked. Please, I just need you to sign for the pizza even if it's wrong. My boss will. Your boss did this? No. Yes. Sort of. She was shaking now, the exhaustion and fear and desperation she'd been holding together finally spilling over. He's not just my boss. He's my. We live together. It's complicated. It's not complicated. Dante's voice was soft, but something dangerous lurked beneath the surface. A man who hits a woman is a coward. There's nothing complicated about that. Sophie should leave, should shove the pizza at him, get her signature, and run back to the life she was trapped in. Marcus would be angry if she was late. Marcus was always angry lately. But something in the stranger's eyes held her in place. Not pity. She couldn't have borne pity. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophie. Sophie Brennan." "Sophie." He said it like he was memorizing it. "How long has he been hurting you?" The question cracked something open. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt the walls she'd built start to crumble. I can't. Nico. Dante didn't look away from her face, but his voice carried to the man who'd answered the door. "Pay for the pizza, triple the usual tip." "Sir?" "And tell Marco to get a car ready." His eyes finally released her, but only to turn toward the house. "She's not going back there tonight." Sophie's heart hammered. "I can't just. He'll come looking for me. He'll. Let him look." Dante turned back to her, and the smile that curved his lips was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. "I'd welcome the opportunity to meet a man who thinks he can use his fists on someone half his size." "You don't understand. Marcus isn't just." She stopped. Swallowed. "He works for people. Bad people. He runs a delivery operation, but it's not really about pizza. The shop is a front for. For what?" She shouldn't say it. Shouldn't trust a stranger. Shouldn't get involved in things that would only make her situation worse. But the words came out anyway. Exhaustion and terror stripping away her caution. "Drugs. Money. I don't know everything, but I know it's dangerous. He told me if I ever tried to leave, his people would find me. And they would." She couldn't finish. Couldn't say what Marcus had promised in graphic detail, late at night, when he wanted to remind her who she belonged to. Dante was very still. His eyes had changed, the storm clouds turning to ice, then to something hotter. Fury, she realized. Tightly controlled, but unmistakable. "Who does he work for?" "I don't know names. Just, he calls someone every Sunday. Reports numbers. I've heard him mention something called the Corsetti operation, but I don't." "Corsetti." Dante's voice was barely a whisper. Something shifted in the air. The man at the door, Nico, went rigid. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. "You know them?" Sophie asked. "They're my enemies." Dante's gaze returned to her face, and she saw something new there. Interest. Calculation. And beneath it all, still burning, that fury on her behalf. "Which means your boyfriend works for people who would very much like to see me dead." "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'll go." "You'll stay." Not a request. A command, wrapped in velvet. "You've just become very valuable to me, Sophie Brennan, and I protect things that are valuable." "I'm not a thing." The words surprised her. She hadn't talked back to anyone in months, had learned that disagreement earned bruises, that silence was safer. But Dante didn't strike her. Instead, something like respect flickered in those storm-gray eyes. "No," he agreed. "You're not. You're a woman who's been abused by a coward and trapped by circumstances beyond your control. But you walked into my house tonight, Sophie. You told me the truth when lies would have been easier. That makes you brave. And I don't let brave people suffer when I can help." He extended his hand. Not grabbing, not forcing. An offer. "Come inside, eat something, and when you're ready, tell me everything you know about the Corsetti operation. In exchange, I'll make sure Marcus never touches you again." Sophie stared at his hand, at the door behind him, glowing with warmth and safety, at the life she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. She thought of Marcus, the bruises, the threats, the cage she'd built around herself because escape seemed impossible. She thought of her mother, dead 3 years now, who had stayed with Sophie's father until the very end, who had taught her, without meaning to, that women endured, that this was simply how life worked. But her mother had also taught her other things, how to read people, how to notice details others missed, how to survive in a world that wanted to break her. Sophie had survived this long by being small, by being invisible, by accepting what she was given and never asking for more. Maybe it was time to try something different. She took his hand. "Okay," she said. "I'll tell you everything." Dante's fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, impossibly gentle. He led her across the threshold into the light and warmth of a world she didn't belong in. Behind her, the door closed on the life she was leaving. In front of her, a dangerous man with storm cloud eyes had just promised to save her. And Sophie, who had stopped believing in rescue years ago, felt something she barely recognized stir in her chest. Hope. The inside of the house was nothing like Sophie had imagined. She'd expected cold, clinical, the kind of sterile luxury that rich people use to keep the world at arm's length. Instead, she found warmth. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, the smell of something delicious wafting from a kitchen she could hear but not see. A fire crackled in a stone hearth large enough to stand in. Books lined the walls, real books with cracked spines that had actually been read. It looked like a home, a real one. "Sit." Dante gestured to a chair near the fire. "When did you last eat?" Sophie tried to remember. She'd grabbed half a granola bar between deliveries, maybe around noon. Before that? Yesterday? The day before? Time blurred when you were running on adrenaline and fear. "I'm fine." "That wasn't what I asked." He moved to a sideboard, pouring something amber into a glass. "Rosa, could you bring some food? Whatever's ready." A woman appeared from nowhere. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with the particular competence of someone who ran a household like a military operation. She looked at Sophie, looked at Dante, and nodded without asking questions. "Sit," Dante said again. "Drink this. It'll help." Sophie sat because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. The whiskey burned going down, but it steadied something shaking inside her. She watched Dante settle into the chair across from her, all coiled grace and patient attention, and tried to remember the last time someone had looked at her like she mattered. "The Corsettis," he said. "Tell me what you know." So she told him. Everything she'd overheard in the past year, the Sunday phone calls, the money that came in and went out through the pizza shop, the men who arrived late at night with packages she'd learned not to look at. Names she half remembered. Addresses that might or might not be important. The fragments of a criminal operation she'd tried so hard to ignore while living in its shadow. Dante listened without interrupting. His face gave nothing away, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, tracked every word like a predator following prey. When she finished, the silence stretched between them. Rosa returned with a tray of food, soup, bread, cheese, more than Sophie had seen in one place in months, and disappeared just as quietly. "Eat," Dante said. "I'm not hungry." "You're starving. I can see your collarbone through your shirt." His voice softened, just slightly. "Eat, Sophie. Whatever happens next, you need your strength." She ate. Couldn't help it. The food was too good, her body too desperate. She tried to maintain some dignity, but by the third spoonful of soup she'd given up pretending she wasn't ravenous. Dante watched her with an expression he couldn't read. "The information you've given me is valuable," he said finally. "More valuable than you know. The Corsettis have been moving against my family for years, killing my people, stealing my territory, making plays for power they don't deserve." His jaw tightened. 6 months ago, they killed my cousin, made it look like an accident, but I know better. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I want you to stay here. Work for me. Use that memory of yours, the one that noticed addresses and names you were supposed to forget. and help me bring down the people who've been trying to destroy everything I've built. Sophie's spoon clattered against the bowl. I can't. I'm nobody. I deliver pizzas. I don't know anything about. You know more than you think. And you notice things other people miss. His eyes held hers. Your boyfriend thought you were too broken to be dangerous, too scared to pay attention. He was wrong. You've been watching, cataloging, surviving. Those are skills, Sophie. Skills I can use. And in exchange? Protection. A salary that actually reflects your worth. A place to live where no one will touch you. He paused. And when the Corsettis are destroyed, when Marcus and everyone like him has been dealt with, you'll be free, truly free, to go wherever you want, do whatever you want, become whoever you want. It sounded like a fairy tale, the kind of story her mother used to tell her, before life had beaten the hope out of both of them. Why? Sophie asked. Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, stripped of its usual control. My mother. The words came out like they cost him something. She was like you once. Young, trapped. Married to a man who used his fists when words weren't enough. His jaw clenched. I was 10 years old when I watched her pack a bag in the middle of the night, her face so swollen she could barely see. She took me and my brother and she ran. She had nothing. No money, no connections, no hope. But she ran anyway. What happened? A man helped her, a stranger. He gave her a job, a place to stay, protection from the husband who would have killed her eventually. She worked for him for 20 years, raised her sons under his roof, died peacefully in her bed, surrounded by people who loved her. Dante's eyes found Sophie's. That man was Enzo Marchetti, my father. He married my mother 3 years after he saved her. Sophie's breath caught. Your mother was a woman like you. Desperate, terrified, running from a monster she couldn't escape on her own. He stood moving to the window, his back to her. My father taught me that power exists to protect the powerless. That strength means nothing if you don't use it to shield those who can't shield themselves. I've tried to live by that. He turned back to face her. I'm offering you what he offered her. Safety. A chance. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing more? The question hung between them, loaded with meanings neither of them was ready to examine. You've been hurt, Dante said quietly. Manipulated, controlled. The last thing you need is another man making demands on you. He crossed back to her chair, crouching so they were eye level. I'm offering you a job, Sophie. A home. Protection. That's all. Whatever else happens, whatever else might develop, that will be your choice. Your timeline. Your decision. The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside her. Marcus had never given her choices. Marcus had taken and demanded and punished until she'd forgotten that choices existed. My mother, Sophie heard herself say. She's buried in Queens. I visit her grave every Sunday. If I disappear, Marcus will watch it. He'll know. Then we'll make sure you can visit safely. Armed escort, surveillance sweep, whatever it takes. Dante's voice softened. You don't have to give up the things that matter to you, Sophie. You just have to let someone help carry the weight. She was crying. Hadn't realized it until she tasted salt on her lips. When had she last cried? Tears were weakness. Tears got you hit. But Dante didn't hit her. He simply pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, actual cloth, embroidered with initials she couldn't read, and pressed it into her hands. Is that a yes? He asked. Sophie looked at the fire, the food, the room that felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years. She looked at this man who could destroy her with a word, but had chosen instead to offer salvation, Yes, she whispered. It's a yes. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction, or something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. Good. He rose, offering his hand to help her up. Then welcome to the family, Sophie Brennan. Let's go see about finding you a room. His hand was warm in hers, strong, impossibly gentle. And Sophie, who had learned to fear men's hands, found herself holding on. The first week taught Sophie that she'd forgotten what safety felt like. She slept. Actually slept. Deep, dreamless hours in a bed softer than clouds, without the constant tension of listening for footsteps, calculating the distance to the door, planning escape routes she'd never have the courage to use. When she woke, sunlight streamed through windows and no one was angry at her. The room they'd given her was larger than the apartment she'd shared with Marcus. A private bathroom, a closet already stocked with clothes in her size. She didn't ask how they knew, was learning that people in Dante's world simply handled things, quietly and efficiently, and without making a fuss. Rosa became her unexpected anchor. The housekeeper ran the estate with iron efficiency, but she had soft spots, particularly for strays, Sophie came to realize. She brought extra food at mealtimes, left flowers on Sophie's nightstand, taught her to navigate the sprawling house without getting lost. You remind me of someone, Rosa said one afternoon, finding Sophie curled in the library with a book she'd been too tired to read. The Signora, Mr. Marchetti's mother. She had those same eyes, haunted, but fighting. What happened to her? She healed, slowly, found her strength again. Rosa's weathered face softened. You will too, child. This house is good for healing. Sophie wanted to believe her, but healing required letting go, and she hadn't figured out how to stop bracing for impact. Her work began on the third day. Dante brought her maps, photographs, intercepted communications, asked her to reconstruct everything she remembered from her time with Marcus, every name, every address, every fragment of conversation that might matter. She'd underestimated what she knew. The human mind collected information like pockets collected lint, automatically and without permission. Once she started talking, the details poured out. License plates glimpsed through windows, phone numbers repeated across calls, the rhythms of an operation she'd absorbed through proximity. Here. She pointed to a warehouse on the map, memories surfacing like a bubble from deep water. Marcus went there every Tuesday, late, usually after midnight. He called it the Count. I think they were tallying product. Dante marked the location, adding it to a growing collection of pins. The map looked like a constellation of crime, and Sophie had provided half the stars. You're remarkable, he said quietly. You know that? I'm observant. There's a difference. There isn't. His eyes found hers across the desk. Remarkable means worthy of attention, and you, Sophie Brennan, are very worthy of attention. Heat crept up her neck. She looked away, focusing on the map. What will you do with all this? Destroy them. Systematically, legally when possible, permanently when necessary. His voice hardened. The Corsettis have been a cancer in this city for too long. Your information is helping me excise them. And Marcus? Marcus will be dealt with. She didn't ask what that meant. Wasn't sure she wanted to know. But some dark part of her, the part that remembered every bruise, every threat, every night spent cowering, hoped it would hurt. The second week brought something unexpected. Dante's sister. Isabella Marchetti arrived like a hurricane in designer heels, sweeping through the front door with 3 suitcases and a voice that carried through every room. She was younger than Dante by at least a decade, late 20s, Sophie guessed, with the same storm gray eyes and a smile that could power cities. You must be Sophie. Isabella found her in the library within an hour of arriving, dropping onto the opposite end of the couch with the casual intimacy of old friends. My brother's been very mysterious about you. I had to see for myself. See what? The woman who's made him smile again. Isabella's expression softened. He doesn't smile, you know. Not really. Not since our mother died. But Rosa says you've changed something. I haven't done anything. You survived. Isabella reached out, squeezing Sophie's hand with surprising gentleness. That's not nothing. And you're helping him destroy the people who killed our cousin. That's definitely not nothing. Your cousin? Marco. Pain flickered across Isabella's features. He was like another brother to me. The Corsettis ambushed him 6 months ago. Made it look like a car accident, but we knew better. Dante's been building a case ever since. She met Sophie's eyes. The information you've given him? It's filling in gaps we couldn't fill. You're helping us get justice. The weight of that settled onto Sophie's shoulders. She'd been so focused on her own survival, she'd forgotten that her small observations might matter to people beyond herself. I'm sorry about Marco. Me too. Isabella's smile returned, dimmer now. But we honor the dead by living well, and by making their killers pay. She stood abruptly, pulling Sophie up with her. Now, my brother tells me you've been hiding in this library like a ghost. That stops today. We're going shopping. I don't think... I wasn't asking. Isabella's grin was wicked. Consider it therapy. Dante's paying. The shopping trip was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Isabella dragged Sophie through stores she would never have dared enter, piling clothes into her arms with cheerful disregard for price tags. By the end, Sophie had more outfits than she'd owned in her entire adult life. You're spoiling me, she protested. I'm civilizing you. There's a difference. Isabella linked their arms as they walked toward the waiting car. You've been surviving for so long you've forgotten how to live. I'm going to fix that. Why do you care? Isabella was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was serious in a way Sophie hadn't heard before. Because my mother was you once, scared and hurt, and so used to being small that she'd forgotten how to take up space. My father showed her she could be bigger. Dante's trying to do the same for you. She squeezed Sophie's arm. And because I like you, which is rare, I don't like most people. Sophie laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed? I like you too, she admitted. Obviously, I'm delightful. The third week brought darkness. Sophie woke to shouting, voices echoing from downstairs, the unmistakable tension of something gone wrong. She threw on a robe and followed the noise to Dante's study, where a cluster of men spoke in rapid Italian she couldn't follow. But she caught one word that turned her blood to ice. Cimitero. Cemetery. She pushed through the door without thinking. What happened? Dante turned. His face was a mask, but his eyes were blazing. Marcus knows you're here. One of our people spotted him at your mother's grave this afternoon. He left. He stopped. His jaw worked. He left a message. What message? Dante handed her a photograph. Sophie's mother's headstone, pristine gray marble, the only beautiful thing Sophie had ever been able to afford. Someone had spray-painted a single word across it in red. Whore. Sophie's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Dante hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her, holding her upright when she couldn't hold herself. I'll fix it, he said against her hair. I'll have it cleaned, restored, whatever you need. He defiled her grave. The words came out strangled. My mother's grave. The only place I could still talk to her, and he's a dead man. Dante's voice was ice. I was going to handle him carefully, legally, but this... His arms tightened. This changes things. He'll keep coming. Sophie's voice cracked. He won't stop until he destroys everything I care about. Then we destroy him first. Dante pulled back, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. I promised you protection. I promised you freedom. I intend to keep those promises, Sophie, no matter what it costs. Why? The question tore out of her. Why do you care so much? I'm nobody. You're not nobody. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle, so gentle like she was something precious. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You're helping me bring down enemies I've been fighting for years. You're... He stopped. Something raw flickered in his expression. You're the first person in a long time who's made me remember why I do this. Why any of it matters. Dante. I know. He released her, stepping back, rebuilding the walls she'd watched him drop. I know this isn't the time. I know you need to heal, need space, need 1,000 things that don't include me complicating your life. His voice roughened. But when this is over, when Marcus is gone and you're safe, and you've had time to figure out who you are without fear, I'd like the chance to tell you what you've come to mean to me. Sophie stared at him. This man who'd saved her, protected her, seen her at her worst and hadn't looked away. Who'd lost his mother and his cousin and still chose compassion over cruelty. Who looked at her like she was worth something when she'd spent years being told she was worthless. When this is over, she said quietly, I'd like to hear it. Something bright flashed in those storm-gray eyes. Hope, maybe. Or promise. Then let's end this. He turned to his men, his voice hardening into command. I want eyes on Marcus at all times. I want every Corsetti operation we've identified hit simultaneously, and I want this finished by the end of the week. Sophie watched him transform from the man who'd held her so gently into the general who commanded armies. Both versions were real. Both versions, she was beginning to understand, were hers, if she was brave enough to claim them. The raids began at midnight. Sophie watched from Dante's study as reports came in. Warehouse after warehouse falling, Corsetti operations crumbling like sand castles before a tide. Years of careful intelligence, combined with everything she'd given them, painting targets across the city that Dante's men erased with brutal efficiency. By 3 a.m, the Corsetti Empire was in ruins. We've got eyes on their leadership, Nico reported, his face grim in the lamplight. Salvatore Corsetti is trying to flee the country. We've alerted the feds. They'll pick him up at JFK. And Marcus? A pause. The kind of pause that made Sophie's stomach drop. He wasn't at any of the locations. We think he's gone to ground. Sophie felt the news like a physical blow. All of this, the raids, the destruction, the justice she'd helped deliver. And the man who'd hurt her was still out there. Still hunting. We'll find him. Dante's voice was steady, but she saw the tension in his jaw. He can't hide forever. He doesn't need forever. Sophie's voice came out hollow. He just needs long enough. The night stretched into dawn. Sophie dozed fitfully in a chair by the fire, jerking awake at every sound, her body remembering dangers her mind tried to forget. Dante worked through the night, coordinating operations, receiving reports, building the case that would ensure the Corsettis never rose again. When morning came gray and cold, Sophie made a decision. I want to visit her grave. Dante looked up from his desk, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Sophie, I know it's dangerous. I know Marcus might be watching, but he defiled her. He put that word on her stone, and I need... Her voice cracked. I need to tell her I'm okay. I need to clean it off. I need to say goodbye properly before I can move forward. I can send someone. I have to do it myself. She met his eyes. You understand, don't you? Some things you can't delegate. Some things have to be done by your own hands. The war in his expression was brief but devastating. She saw him weighing her safety against her sanity, calculating risks against the need that burned in her chest. Armed escort, he said finally. Full security detail. You don't leave their sight for a second. Agreed. And I'm coming with you. Dante, you've been awake for... I'm coming with you. His voice left no room for argument. If something happens, I want to be there. I need to be there. The cemetery was quiet in the pale morning light. Sophie walked between headstones with Dante at her side, his men fanning out in a perimeter she tried not to notice. Her mother's grave sat beneath an old oak tree, a premium spot she'd bankrupted herself to afford, because her mother deserved something beautiful after a life of ugliness. The red paint was worse in person. The word screamed against the gray marble, obscene and hateful. Sophie knelt in the damp grass, pulling cleaning supplies from her bag. Her hands shook as she worked, scrubbing at the paint, watching the red dissolve under solvent and determination. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I stayed so long with someone who..." Her voice broke. "But I'm out now. I'm safe. And I'm going to be okay, I promise." Dante stood behind her, silent and solid as a wall. She felt his presence like armor, like protection, like something she'd never known she was missing until she had it. The paint came off slowly. She worked until her fingers were raw, until the marble was gray again, until her mother's name was visible without that hateful word obscuring it. There. She sat back on her heels, tears streaming down her face. There. It's clean. Sophie. Dante's voice was strange, tight. "We need to go. Now." She turned and froze. Marcus stood at the edge of the cemetery, flanked by men with guns. He looked worse than she remembered. Unshaven, wild-eyed, the particular desperation of a man watching his world burn. "You stupid bitch!" His voice carried across the quiet graves. "You think you can hide from me? Think you can run to some new man and pretend I don't exist?" Dante's men were moving, repositioning, but Marcus's people had weapons aimed and ready. A standoff, balanced on a knife's edge. "Let her go." Dante stepped in front of Sophie, placing his body between her and danger. "Your war is with me, not her. My war is with whoever took what's mine." Marcus's laugh was ugly, broken. "You destroyed everything. The Corsettis are finished. My operation is ashes, and she..." His eyes found Sophie, and the hatred there made her want to disappear. "She gave you the information to do it. My own woman. In my own bed. Watching. Waiting. Betraying me. I was never yours." Sophie's voice surprised her. Steady. Strong. Nothing like the whisper she'd used for years. "You beat me. Controlled me. Made me afraid to breathe. But I was never yours, Marcus. And I never will be." Something snapped in his expression. The gun in his hand rose, pointed directly at her. Dante moved. She didn't see the motion, only the aftermath. Dante tackling her to the ground, covering her body with his, the deafening crack of gunfire exploding above them. She heard shouting, screaming, the chaos of violence erupting in a place meant for peace. Then silence. "Dante." She struggled beneath him. "Dante, are you..." He rolled off her, and she saw the blood, his shoulder. Dark and spreading, soaking through his shirt, turning expensive fabric crimson. He'd been hit, had thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for her. "No." The word tore from her throat. "No, no, no." "I'm fine." His voice was strained, his face pale. "It's through and through. I've had worse." "You've been shot." "And you haven't." His hand found her face, smearing blood on her cheek. "That's what matters." Around them, the aftermath unfolded. Marcus lay on the ground, pinned by Dante's men. The gunfight had been brief. 3 of Marcus's people down, the rest surrendering once they realized their boss had lost. Sophie looked at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for years. He seemed smaller now. Pathetic. The monster she'd feared reduced to a bleeding, cursing failure. "You'll pay for this," Marcus snarled. "Both of you. You think prison will hold me? You think—" "I think you should stop talking." Dante's voice was ice despite his injury. "I think you should be very, very grateful I'm choosing to let the law handle you. Because the alternative—" He smiled, and it was the coldest thing Sophie had ever seen. "The alternative would be much more personal." Sophie looked at Dante, bleeding, pale, still managing to be terrifying, and then at Marcus, who was finally, truly powerless. She stood on shaking legs, crossed the space between them, and looked down at the man who'd stolen years of her life. "You told me once that if I ever left, you'd destroy me." Her voice didn't waver. "You said I was nothing without you, that no one would ever want me, that I'd die alone and broken." Marcus glared up at her, hatred burning in his eyes. "You were wrong." Sophie crouched down, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I left. I survived. And I found people who see me, really see me, and think I'm worth protecting, worth loving." She smiled, and it felt like victory. "You were wrong about all of it, Marcus. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that the woman you called worthless was the one who brought you down." She stood, turned her back on him, walked to Dante, who was being supported by Nico, his face gray with pain, but his eyes were blazing with something that looked like pride. "That was impressive," he managed. "I learned from the best." She took his other arm, helping support his weight. "Now let's get you to a hospital before you bleed out in a cemetery. My mother would be appalled." He laughed, actually laughed, despite the blood loss and the chaos and the sirens beginning to wail in the distance. "She'd love you," he said quietly. "My mother, she would have loved you." Sophie felt tears burning her eyes. "Let's survive this first. Then you can tell me about her." "It's a date." His good arm tightened around her shoulders. "Our first official date. I promise to be conscious for most of it." "You'd better be." She pressed a kiss to his uninjured shoulder, the first time she'd initiated contact, the first time she'd reached for him without fear. "Because I have a lot I want to say to you, Dante Marchetti, and you don't get to miss it." They walked out of the cemetery together, wounded, blood-stained, but alive. And Sophie, who had come here to say goodbye to the past, found herself looking forward to the future for the first time in years. 3 months later, Sophie stood in front of her mother's grave and smiled. The headstone gleamed in the afternoon light. Not the old one, but a new one. Dante had commissioned it without telling her, replacing the defiled marble with something even more beautiful. Her mother's name carved in elegant script, the dates of her too short life, and beneath them, words Sophie had chosen herself. She endured with grace. She loved without limit. She raised a daughter who learned to fly. "He did good, Mama." Sophie knelt to arrange the flowers she'd brought, pink roses, her mother's favorite. "The man I told you about, he's something else. You would have liked him. You would have told me he was too handsome to be trusted, and then you would have fed him until he couldn't move." The wind stirred the oak leaves above her, and Sophie chose to believe it was an answer. "I'm happy," she said softly. "I know that's hard to believe. I didn't think I could be, didn't think I remembered how, but I am. I wake up every day without fear. I eat meals without wondering if I'll be punished for taking too much. I laugh, Mama. I laugh all the time now." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were the good kind, the healing kind. "I wish you could see it. I wish you could have had this too." She stayed for a long time, talking to the woman who'd taught her to survive, and the memory that was finally, blessedly, untainted by horror. When she finally rose, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The car was waiting at the cemetery entrance. Dante leaned against it, his arms still in a sling, his face turned toward the sun. He looked younger when he wasn't commanding armies. Softer, almost peaceful. He looked like home. "How is she?" he asked as Sophie approached. "Resting easy." Sophie slipped into his good arm, pressing her face against his chest. "Thank you. For the headstone. For everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me. I want to." She pulled back to look at him. "You saved my life, Dante. Not just from Marcus, from the person I was becoming. The ghost who'd forgotten how to live. You brought me back. You brought yourself back." His hand curved around her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I just provided the opportunity. The strength was always yours." 3 months of healing had taught Sophie many things: how to sleep through the night, how to eat without guilt, how to occupy space without apologizing for existing. But the most important lesson had been simpler. She was worth loving. Not despite her damage, but including it. All the broken pieces of her had found someone willing to hold them gently while they fused back together. "Isabella's planning something," she said, changing the subject before she started crying again. "She's been whispering with Rosa all week. I think there might be a party." "There's definitely a party." Dante's smile was wry. "My sister doesn't understand the concept of subtlety. She's been planning your birthday celebration since the day you moved in." "My birthday's not for 2 weeks." "Try telling her that." Sophie laughed. The easy, unguarded laugh that still surprised her every time it emerged. "She's going to exhaust herself. She's going to exhaust everyone. It's her gift." He opened the car door for her, wincing slightly at the movement. The shoulder was healing well, but it would be months before he had full mobility. "But she loves you. We all do." The words hung in the air between them. They'd been dancing around this for weeks. The charged glances, the lingering touches, the conversations that veered toward confession before pulling back. Sophie had needed time, and Dante had given it to her. But time had done its work, and she was tired of waiting. "I love you too," she said quietly. Dante went still, his hand frozen on the car door, his eyes searching her face like he was afraid he'd misheard. "Sophie, I know what I said before, about needing time, about not being ready." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel his breath on her face. "But I'm ready now. I've been ready for weeks. I was just scared to say it. Scared that wanting you would somehow curse it. That happiness wasn't something I was allowed to keep. And now? Now I'm tired of being scared." She took his face in her hands. This face she'd memorized over months of longing. Every line and angle and expression cataloged like precious data. "I love you, Dante Marchetti. I love how you protected me when you didn't have to. I love how you waited when I wasn't ready. I love how you look at me like I'm something precious when I've spent years being told I'm worthless." "You are precious." His voice was rough. "You're the most valuable thing I've ever held." "Then hold me." She rose on her toes, bringing her lips close to his. "Hold me, and don't let go." He kissed her like a man who'd been drowning and finally found air. Desperate and tender, fierce and gentle, everything contradictory and perfect. Sophie melted into him, years of touch starvation dissolving under the warmth of someone who wanted her, not to possess, not to control, but simply to love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante pressed his forehead to hers. "I had a speech planned," he said, "for when this moment came. I was going to be eloquent and romantic and—" "Forget the speech." Sophie kissed him again, quick and joyful. "Just tell me what you want." "Everything." The word was immediate, absolute. "I want everything with you, Sophie. Every morning and every night. every fight and every reconciliation. I want to grow old watching you become the woman you were always meant to be. He reached into his pocket with his good hand. And I want to start now. Today. Before another minute passes without you knowing what you mean to me. The ring was beautiful. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in white gold that caught the light like captured stars. Old, clearly, an heirloom, not something purchased yesterday. My mother's, Dante said softly. My father gave it to her the day he asked her to stay. She wore it for 30 years. Through everything. Through all of it. She told me once that it was the symbol of her second chance, the life that started when she stopped running. He met Sophie's eyes. I'd like it to mean the same for you, if you'll have me. Sophie looked at the ring, at this man who'd offered her salvation and asked nothing in return, at the life stretching out before her, terrifying and wonderful and finally hers. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. The ring slid onto her finger like it had been waiting there all along. Dante kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a confession. And Sophie felt the last frozen pieces of her heart finally, completely thaw. The wedding was held in the garden of the Marchetti estate, 6 months later. Sophie wore her mother's dress, carefully preserved, painstakingly altered, carrying the memory of a woman who'd deserved more than she'd gotten. Isabella stood as maid of honor, radiant in burgundy, crying through the entire ceremony while insisting she had allergies. Rosa sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with the same handkerchief she'd given Sophie that first night. The Signora would be so proud, she whispered afterward. Both of them. The vows were simple. No grand speeches, no elaborate poetry. Just two people promising to love each other through whatever came next. I promise to see you, Sophie said, echoing words she'd heard from him months ago. The real you. The man behind the power and the name. I promise to keep seeing you every day, even when you make it difficult. I promise to deserve your vision, Dante replied. To be the man you believe I am. To protect you and cherish you and never, ever give you reason to fear. His voice cracked slightly. I promise to love you the way you should have been loved all along, the way you always deserved. When they kissed, the applause was thunderous. Isabella's cheering could probably be heard 3 counties over. Later, much later, Sophie stood on the terrace of what was now her home, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The ring on her finger caught the last light, sparkling with promises kept and promises still to come. Dante's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. The sling was gone now, his shoulder healed, his strength returned. She felt surrounded by him, protected, cherished, home. What are you thinking? He murmured against her hair. About wrong turns. She smiled, leaning into his warmth. About how a mixed-up pizza order led me here. About how the worst night of my life turned into the beginning of the best chapter. The beginning, he agreed. We have a lot of chapters left to write. Any predictions? A few. He turned her in his arms, gray eyes soft in the fading light. I predict you'll keep surprising me, keep challenging me, keep making me want to be better than I am. He kissed her forehead. I predict we'll fight sometimes, and make up spectacularly. I predict Isabella will continue to be a hurricane, and Rosa will continue to feed us both until we can't move. I predict our children, if we're lucky enough to have them, will have your eyes and your courage. Children? Sophie's heart stuttered. Someday. Maybe. If you want them. His smile was gentle. We have time, Sophie. All the time in the world. Nothing has to be decided tonight. She thought about it. About tiny hands and sleepless nights. About raising children in safety and love. About giving them the childhood she'd never had. about doing it all with this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. Someday, she said. Definitely someday. Then I'll add it to the list of things to look forward to. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until her knees went weak and the stars blurred overhead. Right below, making my wife smile every single day. Your wife? The word was still new, still wonderful. That's me. That's you. He pulled her closer, and Sophie felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Forever, Sophie Marchetti. For as long as you'll have me. Forever, she agreed. And standing there in the arms of the man who'd saved her, wearing his mother's ring and his name, Sophie finally understood what her mother had been searching for all those years. Not just survival, not just escape. Home. She'd found it in the most unlikely place, in the arms of a dangerous man with storm cloud eyes, in a house that had sheltered broken women before her, in a love that had grown from gratitude into something fierce and true. One wrong pizza order, one visible bruise, one moment of courage that had changed everything. Sophie smiled against Dante's chest and let herself believe in happy endings, because this one was hers. Thank you all so much for following Sophie's story. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support is what allows me to continue creating stories like this one.